Hello, this is Eric Person. In this video, we'll go over the Excel workup for Experiment 2 in Chem 1A. In this lab, we took the percent salt solutions and we measured their density, and we want to build a calibration plot that we can use to determine the unknown salt percent in our sample. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the X and the Y data. Our independent variable, or what goes on the X data, was the percent salt. I'm going to just type that in, hit Tab. Excel's going to treat that as words, and that's great. Density was our dependent variable, or what we're going to plot on the y-axis, and I'm going to go ahead and enter the units here of grams per milliliter. Now I'm going to take a minute and enter the data. The water blank was our 0% salt. And I can enter the three replicate measurements I made by just entering the same X value of 0%. Now you notice that last one, it got rid of the extra zeros. It's not displaying the number of significant figures I like. Once I've entered all this data, I'll show you how to adjust that. Okay, skipping ahead, I've now entered all of the data. I've put in percentages in my X data column. Now, because the percentage symbol's in the same cell, these are really, 12% is really 0.12. It's just displaying it as a percentage. Now, in all of these cases, the containers were labeled with one significant figure, so I'm not going to worry about changing the number of significant figures I'm entering. But in this case, the density that the students measured were each to 4 significant figures once they followed their sig-fig rules in the calculations. I'm going to use the increase and decrease decimal point to make sure that it's displaying all 4 significant figures in every case. And that makes the data look nice and clean, and 1 shows up as 1.000. Okay, you'll also notice that I left a little space and then went ahead and entered my unknown densities. We'll come back to that later, but we want to start with plotting the calibration data. To plot data, I'm going to select both sets of data, the entire region I want to plot, including the labels. And I'm going to go to the chart wizard. You can find the chart wizard in Excel 2007 and the Mac version of Excel under the Insert tab. You always want to do XY scatter plots. Get in the habit of that now. And in general, I don't plot data with the connect the dots because the data are points, not lines. And so I'm going to select this as my chart type. Next, here's my raw data. I'm going to go to Next again. On the titles, I'm going to put Chem 1A Lab 2 as a title. You can enter whatever title your instructor wants or you think is appropriate. My x-axis is percent sodium chloride. Remember, that was our X data, was the percent salt. The Y data was density, and it's often useful to include units. In this case, grams per milliliter. I don't particularly care for grid lines, so I'll turn the grid lines off. And I have one set of data, so I don't really need the legend. You have an option about whether you insert the object in the worksheet that you're working on or in a separate sheet. In this case, I'm going to show it as within the worksheet, but you can just as easily change it. So I'm going to move it over a little bit so I have some room to work, and I can resize it. The gray backgrounds can give you a hassle when printing. If you just click on the gray background, it highlights it. You can press the delete key to get rid of it. Now, in this case, as I look at the data, I clearly have some data points here that don't line up. I have a more or less linear trend in this region with maybe some confusion around these values. Now, the easiest way to calculate a trend line is to right-click on your data series and add trend line. Be sure to go to Options so that it displays your equation for your best fit line in the chart, and you want to make sure you're on linear. You click OK, and it plots a best fit line. Now, the problem with this technique is you'll see this doesn't fit our data very well, and it's because it's trying to include these data points. I'm going to suggest that you don't use this strategy. To use this strategy, you would need to move these data points to a separate column and plot them as another series. I think an easier way to do this, or a better way to do it, is a full regression analysis, and I'll show you how to do that here quickly. In this case, I want these data points excluded, so I need to move these data points. I'm going to select them, cut, and I'm going to insert cut cells here. So I've moved them to the bottom of my plot. I want to change my plot so it's displaying those data points. I just clicked on the series, and I resized these bounding boxes, so now it's plotting that entire range. Now the reason I moved it to the bottom is I'm going to calculate the slope and intercept of this data manually. So that was the M and the B in the equation on the trend line. Clicking in this cell, I'm going to use a function. So I'm going to start with equals. The function's name is slope. It tells me to put in my known y values. Now I'm not going to include the 18% data because I don't want that included in my fit line. I am going to include both of these. And then it says a comma, and now my known x data, and that's the salt solution. There's another function called intercept. Known y values, comma, known x values. Now it's important that you have the ranges the same size or these functions will return errors. Okay, I'm going to make a new column of data. I'll just do it over here. I want my fit line to go from 0 to 25%. Okay, so that's my new x data for a line that I want to draw on my chart. The y values that I'm going to generate for that, y is equal to m. Now, as I copy this down, I'm anticipating here. If I copy this cell down, it moves the reference. It's no longer pointing to E2, it points to E3. If I want it to copy without moving the reference, I need to put $signs in. Okay, I think it's Command T on a Mac. On a PC, it's F4. Puts the $signs in, and it will toggle through. I'm going to put $signs before each, and this makes it an absolute cell reference. No matter where I copy it, it's always going to point to E2. Okay, that's my slope. My x value is this 0. So m times x plus b. Now I want the x value to move as I drag it down, so I'm going to leave that as what's called a relative cell reference. And this E3, the intercept, needs to stay put. I'll press F4 again. And so I have m times x plus b. And as I copy that down, I get a curve that looks something like this. Okay? Or a line that gets something that looks like this. I want to add that to my data. Select your chart, add data, select the range, new series, the data's in column, and category X values are in the first row. Okay. Now it's plotted it as data points. You see the two pink data points? If I right-click on that and go to Format Data Series, or if I double-click on one of those pink data points, it opens up the Format Data Series. Now this looks a little different in Excel 2007, but the data points Excel calls markers. I don't want markers, and I do want a line. I'd like to have that line be the same color as the previous data points. And OK. And so now what I've done is my fit has no data points. It's just a line about what the best fit is. Okay. And the data has no lines. It just has data points. And now this is a pretty good fit of my experimental data.